Hey guys, it's Ashley, and today I am introducing a brand new series on my channel called This Then That. So in this series I'm going to choose a book and I'm going to basically say if you liked this, then try that. And in this version of This Then That, we are going to be focusing on Looking for Alaska by John Green. So all of the books that I'm going to recommend in this video are going to be recommendations based on specific aspects that you may or may not have liked in Looking for Alaska. I chose Looking for Alaska as my first book pick for This Then That video because it is one of my favorite books of all time, and I feel like quite a lot people ask for recommendations based on this book because it is pretty unique and it has a very unique feel to it that I feel like it's hard to find that feel in other novels. So I chose to do this one first because it's one of my favorites and I think it's going to be one that you guys want to hear recommendations for, so hopefully you enjoy. I should add before we move on that if you haven't read Looking for Alaska, you are not going to want to watch the rest of this video because I am going to be spoiling Looking for Alaska, and Looking for Alaska is one of my favorite books of all time, so I do not want to spoil it for any one of you. So if you haven't read it, go read it and then come back and watch this video, but do not watch on because I do not want to spoil things for you. My first choice for people who liked Looking for Alaska is actually The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. I actually don't physically have my copy of this because I lent it to a friend recently. The Perks of Being a Wallflower is about a main character named Charlie who is a wallflower. So he's kind of like an outsider who's looking in, and he pays attention to a lot of different aspects of human behavior, but he's not super popular himself. And during the novel, at the beginning of the novel, he becomes friends with this group of really like intricate friends. Like there's a lot of them and they love each other and they're very, very friendly with each other, and it introduces the main character to what friendship is, and it kind of goes from there. It's generally a coming-of-age novel, but it's very well written, and it's basically about this boy who just wants to figure out who he is. And in all honesty, for me, Looking for Alaska is very much about Miles trying to figure out who he is and what he wants. And I felt like that was very, very similar to the way that Charlie felt or acted in The Perks of Being a Wallflower. So if you liked that aspect of Looking for Alaska, I would highly recommend The Perks of Being a Wallflower. The next recommendation that I have is 13 Reasons Why by Jay Asher. So I am recommending this if you genuinely just liked the aspect of them figuring out life and being a teenager. Because 13 Reasons Why for me just kind of had this feeling, it's almost indescribable, but it just made me feel like a lot. And Looking for Alaska did that for me as well, and I think it's because I'm a really big fan of the coming-of-age novel and just the figuring out what it's like to be a teenager novel, and like the fact that just because you have all those feelings doesn't mean that they're wrong or bad or that you can't grow out of them, or that if you never grow out of them that's a bad thing. And I feel like 13 Reasons Why really encompasses all of that, and it makes you feel like, you know, there's being a good person and then there's being a bad person. And sometimes I feel like the line is pretty blurred for a lot of people, but 13 Reasons Why and Looking for Alaska, for me, it really defined that line, and I don't really know how else to describe it, and I don't know if I'm actually describing it in a correct fashion, but that is just the feeling that the books gave me were so similar that I couldn't avoid putting this on the list, even though I couldn't have a real distinguishing reason as to why it's on the list, but nonetheless I highly recommend it. 13 Reasons Why is about a boy named Clay who gets these cassette tapes from this girl that he's been in love with his entire life, and she has completed suicide. She completed suicide a little while ago, and he starts listening to the tapes and he realizes that she has sent the tapes to the 13 people who put her to the place where she was willing to complete suicide. And Clay he doesn't understand how he could be on the tapes, but you can't skip through the tapes because you don't know which one is your tape, so you have to listen to them all. And it is just a heart-wrenching novel. Next, we have The Beginning of Everything by Robin Schneider. I am recommending this if you liked Looking for Alaska because of Miles's narrative. The narrator in The Beginning of Everything is going through a life crisis, and he does not understand who he's becoming or why, but he's still doing it. He's doing it just because it feels right. And I feel like that's exactly what Miles does in Looking for Alaska. And also there is a female character in the beginning of everything that is very Alaska Young-like. Not exactly alike, but they have very similar qualities in certain aspects of their lives. Do I even need to say anything at this point? Winger by Andrew Smith. I feel like I'm just gonna recommend this for every single book. I'm just like, if you've read any book in the world, read Winger. I am recommending this for a very similar reason to the last book. The narrative style of Ryan Dean West is so Miles Pudge Halter. They're both so quirky and just so charming and adorable, and I just love them both so much. This also takes place at a boarding school, and I feel like a lot of people just associate Looking for Alaska with boarding school books. And it's not that all boarding school books are like Looking for Alaska, but this one is actually very similar, and I just really liked the style, and it was just very quirky, and like there's a lot of like pranky-esque stuff in here, which obviously Looking for Alaska has a ton of that, and a ton of hilarity that goes along with the pranks. So does this. Highly recommend. Now we're moving on to a little bit more of the deeper stuff with Looking for Alaska. If you liked Looking for Alaska because of its gritty, very well written, like literature aspects, you will like these books. The first one is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. This is probably one of my favorite books of all time. I honestly couldn't recommend this book highly enough. If you have not read it yet, please go pick it up. Like, this is on the same level as Winger for me. Like, these books are must-reads, must-read YA. This is the story of Aristotle, or Ari, and Dante, who become best friends in the 1980s in Mexico and have to live through just growing up. And one of them is gay, and it's just about how living with that in the 1980s and living with a best friend who is gay in the 1980s just kind of affected both of them. But it's just honestly so well written, and the relationship dynamic of everyone in this book, from parent to child to friend and friend to friend and friend's parents, is just like, all the dynamics are so amazing. And I found that Looking for Alaska had that same aspect where the dynamics between a lot of the characters were just really well developed. So yes. Okay, so you might have noticed that all of the books that I previously mentioned are male point of view books. It is very hard to find a book that felt like Looking for Alaska that wasn't a male point of view, and that's not to say that female point of view books aren't amazing. They are. For the majority of the books I love, they are female point of views. But like, just Miles's perspective in Looking for Alaska is kind of, for me, what made Looking for Alaska. So I only found one book that, in all honesty, really had that feeling for me, and that is Eleanor Park by Rainbow Rowell. And I realize that there's obviously half of the book is told from Park's perspective, but it's also a female author, and it does have a female character in it. But this book had a lot of like gritty content, and that content seemed very similar to the Looking for Alaska content. And I also found that it felt like Looking for Alaska. It's a lot like 13 Reasons Why for me. It just felt that way. It made me feel like I mattered. It made me feel like the whole world was mine for the taking almost. And I don't think a lot of people got that feeling from Eleanor Park, but I really did. I felt like the book really and I'm not giving anything away, but Looking for Alaska makes you feel like, you know, really crappy things happen in life, and they happen every day, but that doesn't mean that you're hopeless, or that life is hopeless, or that happiness is hopeless. And I feel like Eleanor Park at its core is honestly saying that. And yeah, they're similar, and I think that if you're a Looking for Alaska fan, you will also like Eleanor Park. Okay, so those, along with The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky, are my recommendations for if you liked Looking for Alaska. So if you have read Looking for Alaska and or any of the books mentioned in this video, let me know whether you thought they were similar, if you liked them both, or if you didn't. I want to hear your opinions. Comment down below and let me know. And also, since this is a new thing on my channel, if there is a book that I have read in the past or that I've raved about and you want to know what I would recommend if you liked that book but you don't know what to read next, comment down below and let me know what I should do the next This Then That video on. If you guys enjoyed this video and you want to see more This Then That videos, please give it a thumbs up so that I know that you want to see more This Then That videos. And other than that, I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys soon with another video. Bye!